This is the fourth episode of our Cops Coaches Chat series. You can find the previous conversations with Olympic and elite level athletes on our YouTube channel. Today we have a real treat in store for you. We are lucky to be joined by multiple Olympian Miley and her longtime coach, who is also her father, Patrick Miley. In this episode, we delve into the key attributes a young athlete needs if they want to make it to the top, the coaching processes required to assist that progression, and finally, the importance of the relationship between parents and athletes. Hannah, Patrick, if I can ask you to take this opportunity just to give a kind of brief outline on yourself, your history in the sport, and kind of where you're going with the future. Hannah, we'll start with you.
Okay. So I was introduced to swimming by my dad, Patrick. Taught me how to swim when I was very young, purely for a safety point of view. He's taught both my brothers as well, just so that we were safe in and around water. Joined my first swimming club when I was about, I think, 6, and that was good old Geary in Inverurie, training a 4-lane 25-meter pool. And kind of from there, I had other activities going on as well as swimming. But over time, I just remember I couldn't wait till I could turn 8, because for me, you had to be 8 years old to go to a public session without an adult. And for me, all I wanted to do was to go with my friends and just play in the water. My dad and I went lane swimming. I always had to do more lengths than him. I always felt when he was trying to get me to do technique work, I was kind of possibly the annoying child of coming into the wall, pretending I was going to finish, and then doing a tumble turn and pushing off to do 2 more lengths. So I kind of knew I had a bit of a competitive streak within me from quite a young age. And as I grew older, I've got incredible floppy feet, so I can trip over on a flat floor very, very easily. And any sports on land, it kind of didn't really transfer well. So for me, being in the water just fit really, really well. And yeah, I just really enjoyed the journey that we've been on. It's been an interesting dynamic, and I wouldn't have it any other way, really. It's worked for us, and we've kind of taken it to new levels, and we've both learned. I've learned a lot from my dad, and he's learned a little bit from me as well. So it's been a kind of an evolving relationship and an evolving journey. And currently, obviously, with lockdown, there's still more learning to be had, whether it's listening into other coaches' conferences or doing question and answers to other clubs. For me, I'd love to be able to give back to the sport.
Hi, my name's Patrick. My history, I've been around a little bit longer than Hannah, so I won't bore you with all of it, but I was born and brought up in Birmingham in the Midlands. But personal sporting background was rugby as opposed to swimming. I did swim in a club and I swam as much as I could. But my family were pretty focused on Irish dancing, believe it or not. My sister was a world champion Irish dancer. So that's a fact that not many people will know about Hannah's connection to Irish dancing. I was educated in Birmingham. I did a degree in Leicester in industrial design engineering, and I didn't particularly enjoy the subject. So I got work for a while driving lorries, selling ice cream, then decided to join the army. And I spent about 8 years in the military, ended up on the North Sea in Aberdeen, flying helicopters as the only place I could get work. Decided I was going to stay for 2 years, and ended up a total of 32 years flying helicopters rather than doing something else. Whilst I was flying, I did continue to enjoy my swimming myself and then coaching. And I got more and more involved in the coaching and thoroughly enjoyed it. I developed a programmable pacing device called the Aquapacer, which people may or may not have heard of. Somebody did steal the idea and develop the tempo trainer, but that's a different story. And that was in the early 1990s through to 1996. I was involved with 5 swimmers where Paul Palmer managed to get an Olympic silver, so that helped develop the product even more. The product went to market in 98, and by 2000, actually 1 in every 3 Olympic gold medalists in swimming were using the device. So I was really lucky. I was out around the world working with Australians, Americans, some Europeans and some Brits with it. So that was quite an adventure. Around about 2003, I left the business I set up and decided to continue flying, but focus more on my coaching. And that's where kind of a lot of things, I guess, changed for Hannah as well, because we started to focus more on developing performance swimming. I left Geary about 3 or 4 years ago when I finished my flying to take up a job as a performance coach in Aberdeen at the new high performance centre there. So we're very fortunate. We've got an incredible facility now, as opposed to the 4-lane rope divided lanes pool that Hannah did 3 Olympics in. So it's quite an interesting contrast. And I've been very, very fortunate. I've been on quite a few teams, 2 Olympic Games, World Championships, European long course, and lots of short international meets. And I've been very, very lucky and enjoyed every moment of it.
It's fantastic, because they're both very varied from the people we've interviewed already. So I think kind of the answers that we're going to get from the questions are going to be very different. And I think that's fantastic. So obviously, as the lockdown's beginning to relax, it's very easy to kind of look back on what many will perceive to be quite a negative period. What positives have you found during this kind of 10, 11 weeks? Patrick, let's start with you.
I'm quite surprised at the positives as a coach. I've been really impressed with my group of swimmers. We've got 3 squads in the program, and I run what they call the high performance group. And I've certainly recognized the levels of commitment. We have Zoom sessions in the mornings where people do land work, and they deliver it themselves now because of furlough and different conditions. So I've been really impressed with their consistency, their attitude, and their application. So I've learned a lot about the swimmers I wouldn't have learned about. I've also had to find out, I didn't know how to spell Instagram, let alone have an Instagram page. So we do have one now, and I've learned how to spell it as well. So I find that quite peculiar. I'm less connected physically, but I feel more connected in that there's a lot more sharing that's gone on. We've set up live shared files, so I know each day their feelings, their emotional and physical fatigue levels. They fill in the amount of minutes that they do at particular levels. So I've got a lot of raw data of land work that they've done that's really useful. And we've got habits that we'll take back into when we get back in the pool. Also, at the same time, I was asked initially to do a talk about the 400 IM for Scottish swimming, and that challenged me because my initial response was, I like swimming, not just the 400 IM. But it did make me look at it in a much more clinical way than usual, and I enjoyed that challenge. I'm certainly enjoying things like this and listening to other people. More importantly, there's been some amazing talks, Zoom sessions, and podcasts that I've been following. It's been a very interesting. It's been challenging. There's a lot going on in my home here, but I won't bore you with that. But it's been an interesting time. And I feel like I've learned a lot. Hannah?
In finding the positives, I guess going into lockdown, that wasn't the first thing I set out to do. It wasn't a matter of, right, how can I turn this into a positive? I guess my mindset was, how do I use this as an opportunity? And I guess from opportunity, the positives kind of came through. The first 2 weeks, I kind of thought I had it down, I had it nailed. And then I really struggled from week 3 to week 5. Probably more emotionally than anything. There was a drop in sort of motivation levels to do the work and get it done. But one of the things that really helped was having those frequent Zoom sessions with the squad, trying to set up basically a weekly timetable so I knew what each day, what I had, and kind of give myself a little bit of a purpose for each day. So if I wanted to try and achieve something, whether it's trying to finish coursework for Pilates or try and do a course on like suspension training, I try and plug it in and be a little bit more organized with my time rather than frittering. I'm very good at kind of frittering my time sometimes, so I thought I needed to structure it. And then from that, making sure that I do enjoy maybe a little bit of time where I can maybe have like 1 or 2 hours where I do sit back and just chill. And for me, working with my dog a lot more has actually been quite a big positive. I've been teaching her quite a few tricks and just something that's different, something that isn't sport related, but for me mentally just makes me feel really happy.
What's the best trick that she's learned?
Currently teaching her to pack my swimming bag.
Is that the next Instagram challenge that you're going to do?
It's a great idea.
Yeah. And yeah, doing the challenges as well. Like for me, I kind of felt it was an opportunity to engage with some of the youngsters, because I know it's an awful time. You know, you've lost all that training for the season and you don't have any competitions coming up. They've also got schoolwork and exams. So there's a lot of things that quite a few youngsters possibly would feel the rug's been pulled out from underneath them. So I thought it was an opportunity to maybe try and find ways of bringing a bit of fun and a bit of positivity. So trying to find some of the challenges to kind of put out and just see whether it gave people, you know, an hour or 10 minutes out of their day to do something that hopefully would make them laugh, make them try, you know, see if it's a new skill. But probably what a lot of people don't realize is how long sometimes it takes me to film these. Like the toilet roll one took me about 4 days. Whether I could replicate it or not, I don't know. But yeah, it just trying to kind of do things a little bit differently, but use it as an opportunity to try and find a little bit more about my sport. So I've been able to join in some of the meetings that some coaches have been doing, and some of our Zoom meetings that Patrick's been putting together to basically research some of our sport a little bit more in detail. And it just kind of keeps and feeds that motivation a little bit more. And yeah, I think just trying to find that sense of purpose as well helps.
Brilliant. You guys are both vastly experienced in the swimming genre, from base club through to you know, the senior position you both find yourself in right now. Is there anything in your experience you can draw on to help, one, in the isolation, but two, now in the situation where we find we haven't got competition for 6 months, advice wise really for our membership? That's sure.
I think whilst we're isolated, I do think reflective practice is really good. And by that, I mean, how often do we get, if we're in the world of swimming, because we're either swimmers working hard, go to school, do our homework, get back, and we don't stop to think. So I do believe that the amount of time we've got to contemplate how we operate, what we do and how we do it is really, really important. I took a long time reflecting on Hannah's career, for example, just looking at how crazy it seems to be as a parent of a younger swimmer and how much commitment there is involved in that, and actually how different things have become. I've certainly, on a personal level, spent some time really sadly looking at quite old swimming videos and trying to catch up with some of the thoughts that I didn't have at those times. But equally, just pressing that pause button and recognizing that, you know, our own health and looking after ourselves is probably the single most important thing, and often the first thing that some people put to one side in the business of life. So, and I'm definitely guilty of that. So I feel I've tried a wee bit more that way. Also, you don't get that much time together with people that, if you're fortunate to have them around. So that is a positive. As far as competitions and things are concerned, I'm actually quite excited by the fact that we're forced to collectively have a whole load of athletes not do the normal thing and see what the normal thing becomes. I'm not afraid of swimmers getting back in, because we're much more plastic than I think we give ourselves credit for. I think some of the boys will have grown. I think some of the younger girls will have grown. I think if they've been sensible and done some form of exercise, they'll get back on it very, very quickly. Hopefully the parents have had time to decompress as well and relax and actually appreciate that those early mornings and driving is a good thing. It's a positive thing in our lives, because we're part of a member of a family outside of our own family. Sometimes when you miss something, you value it more. So I personally see it as very, very valuable. I know 1 or 2 coaches around the world who've continued training their athletes, and they've kind of contacted me, and I'm sure that they were quietly saying, look what we're still doing. Well, one of those 2 has just contacted me saying that their athlete is now quite badly injured. They've pushed it too hard. So, you know, there's light at the end of the tunnel, and Hannah's no young athlete. There's a lot of time. I'm not sure how old the athletes are here, but you have so much time, so much time. There is nothing to be rushed at here.
I think patience has definitely been a key message, particularly over the last couple of weeks with the communications that have gone out, and the opportunity to swim open water. People are desperate to swim, and you know, I know for us, the opportunity to extend into the education and build on our athletic base has been brilliant. I've loved that part of it. And yeah, I think it's amazing. I've not really thought so much about the reflection, so it's something I'm going to take away from this, Patrick. That's great. How about you, Hannah?
Yeah, self-reflection has actually been probably one of the things I've learned to use a little bit more. And I guess to sort of the opportunity side. Yeah, it has been very, very strange. And as I say, you've got that roller coaster of emotions where sometimes you feel in control of things and then other times you don't. And probably the first 2 weeks, I was just rushing in to try and do everything because I thought, I've got time to do this, I've got time to do that, I can do all these different things. And then I just hit that wall sort of the 3 to 5 week time. And patience, definitely, you know, even at my age, I kind of still need to learn to, you know, hold on, let's just take the time with things. I can't do something and then expect that result at the end. So taking the time, like each day before the workouts, I use the time to do pre-pool work. So even though I'm not going in the pool, I still keep that practice and habit of doing my pre-pool, but also it still keeps those muscles that should be worked in the pool active and just reminding my body. So those little bits, I guess I've kind of had to figure out throughout the week. So I've not got it right straight away.
Hannah, is that something you've done off your own back or something that's been directed for you to do?
Something that I've kind of done off my own back, but I've had help from my physio support wise. We kind of saw it as an opportunity to work a little bit on some rehabilitation work through just a couple of niggles that I've had. So whilst I'm not in the water, we kind of saw it as an opportunity of being like, right, well, let's get on top of this and try and strengthen it up in a way that's, you know, going to hopefully make it a little bit more robust for when we get back in the water. But doing the pre-pool work was kind of off my own back. I just kind of saw it as, you know what, it's the one thing that I think a lot of swimmers are kind of guilty for not doing, or you can get out of the habit for. So that was kind of my own thing of being like, right, well, I'm just going to use my pre-pool as a sort of a form of discipline, a form of making sure that before our workouts that I am warmed up beforehand. And then obviously the physio input of being like, well, the purpose behind it is to hopefully add in a bit more strength and robustness.
How long each day do you spend on that, Hannah, on pre-pool?
It's only like 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. It's not long because we normally get 15 minutes in the mornings anyway before we get in the water. So it's kind of precise and purposeful to make sure that it's, obviously it's quite a short bit of time.
Okay, cool. Patrick, have you, is there anything you specifically done to deal with Hannah, particularly in periods of struggle and challenge?
Yeah, I would say so. With regard to the present time, my first response, it was a Friday. The week before, there was a competition in Edinburgh. It wasn't really, we were all in that sort of bubble believing things weren't going to happen. On the Friday, I finished the session at 6:30, and on the assumption that the Monday, the Saturday morning and the following week, we were going to carry on with a small group, carry on training, and then we were told no. So immediate response over the weekend was, I wasn't expecting this. It was a bit of a rabbit in headlights. So my response was to kind of timetable. I get very hooked into spreadsheets and try and timetable all of the swimmers' needs. So over the weekend, I thought about set up a shared file. So they all had access to that, and they had to share their data that we normally do from a day-to-day basis. Also put together a loose timetable. Then Hannah, I asked each of them to give me their view of what they thought they could do, and then I collated one, and Hannah's one came back very, very comprehensively, very quickly. So I knew straight away she had a strategy in mind to respond immediately. So the present time has kind of rolled that way, and it's been typical of the way we operate. In the past, we've had lots of issues. Forgive me, Hannah, if it's the wrong year, 2015, or was it 2014? I can't remember, but she crushed her finger. We were out in Spain on a camp, broke a finger, crushed it and split the end of it. And it was pretty severe with a weight in the gym after a morning swim session. Wow. And we weren't that far out from World Championships. So it was bad enough then going to the hospital, get it stitched, put it in the towel, whatever you do, don't get it wet. So we were trying to be innovative, putting all sorts of things on her hands to keep it dry. And we were very innovative with that. A couple of days later, we had a visit from a different coach and some sports scientists to do some checks. On the way back from that session, she got knocked off her bike by a drunk Polish guy who broke it again, and we went back to the hospital. They're saying, you did this 2 days ago. Is this a habit? So some of those things, and that's not the only one. Hannah's actually dislocated 4 fingers at the end of a race once in Glasgow, and we had to go to another hospital. How many other times have you been? So, and in 2018, the end of it, Hannah had surgery on her foot. So we had from the end, let's say November 18 through to the end of the season to try and work our way back towards a target point, which was to get back under 440, which she did. She went 439 out in America. And then the issue then was to build up through to the Olympic trials and try and get to the 4th Olympic Games. So 2 things was dealing with the injury, or the surgery, and it was much more invasive than even the surgeon thought, because he hadn't appreciated how much flexibility, when you remove a ligament from the foot, how much flexibility and damage that has caused. And as we got through that, and we've continued to get through that. And of course now there's another halt and another change. So if anyone thinks the graph from start to end is a straight line, it just isn't. It is not. And injuries and damage, if you like, in training is part of the course, not one you aim for, but from the very, very minor ones are challenging as much as the major ones.
Hannah, I'm just interested because I had no clue on that side, and avid fan, and been obviously watching what you do on a world-class level over the years. I had no clue that you went through that. Where was your mindset, particularly after surgery? How did you cope with that? How do you manage that and cope with that situation?
Yeah, I'll admit it was a little bit all over the place. You kind of feel one day you'll be fine and pretty happy and accepting that it happened, and then the next day you just have pure frustration and anger with yourself that you feel, I'm broken, that's it, it's not going to work. And it's a real sort of up and down. And I was told I had to be out the water, I think, for like 2 or 3 weeks, and I wasn't really allowed to do anything that involved me being upright for a week, just so that I didn't burst the stitches. And I thought, okay, right, I'll use this opportunity to just sit back, chill, unwind, maybe just think of something else other than sport. And I lasted all of 24 hours. It drove me mad. I couldn't sit still. And for me, I guess it was that sort of eagerness of, right, every hurdle and stuff that we've come up against, we've always really thought outside the box. And I guess that's one of the things that really sets us apart and is different, like coming up with a way of trying to keep your finger dry while still swimming. We've never been afraid of looking at what's possible. So you obviously can't control what's not possible. So for me, being on my feet and being in the water wasn't possible, but I still had 3 other limbs working quite well. So I kind of sat and thought, okay, well, if I want to try and maintain some form of fitness, what can I do? Well, I can't run, I can't cycle, I can't really row. It's amazing how many things that do really involve your feet. And I then realized that we had in the gym a ski erg, so basically a rowing machine that's vertical and you just can do skiing. So I thought, well, could I do that sitting down? So I got a plyo box, sat down, and I actually was able to still get interval training sessions and work my heart rate from sitting down doing that. And it might not have been the right thing to do, but for me, it felt a lot better than doing nothing. So when it comes to injury, for me, doing nothing just really messed with my head. I felt like I needed to be doing something, even if it was something small, like with a TheraBand doing shoulder work. For me, that was better than not doing something. So for me, keep moving forward was always kind of my mantra, try and find ways of getting back in.
Hannah, sorry to interrupt, but can I mention, I remember you coming poolside one day, and I thought, what's Hannah doing here? Everyone was stretching off, getting in, and then Hannah grabbed a whole load of floats, lay them along the side of the pool, halfway down the pool, lay on the poolside with tracksuit and t-shirt, and then just was sculling water for most of the session, just getting the feel back for water, lying down. And I was like, what are you doing here? But that kind of sums up.
Yeah, so again, it probably had no purpose, but yeah, for me, I just didn't want to lose that feel and the ability. I mean, I possibly could have done it in the bath, but for me, being on poolside, hobbling along with my boot, and just lying myself knowing that I can't get it wet. It's like, well, if my leg can't get wet, my upper body can get wet. So again, just kind of thinking outside the box and not being afraid of, you know what, it doesn't have to be the right or wrong thing to do. It made me happy. It made me feel like I was doing something. So yeah, so there's loads of little stories like that we do. Just try and work what doesn't hurt and avoid what does hurt, simply.
There's a great message there. You know, you're using ingenuity, you're exploring, you're constantly looking at options.
Yeah.
In spite of being in such a, you know, challenging situation. That's a great mindset, you know, really, really positive. Patrick, you've kind of spoken about the reflection, but and I think that's a great thing to look at. Is there some advice you'd offer parents in the way to, you know, who've got children right now, are disappointed that competition's on and you know, there's going to be a long building period? Is there any advice you could offer parents in that situation?
I think at the moment the lockdown is more of an emotional trauma than a physical trauma. I've no concern whatsoever that you know, that young people, and I include Hannah, will get back on it if they want to. So it's dealing with the fallout of how they feel about it, and maybe even getting back to the routine of early training. Also, I think being a parent is a unique thing. There's a lot of coaches I know who don't have children, and I always enjoy talking to them. My father used to say, he's Irish, who will have lots of saying, he used to say, adults don't make children, but children make adults. And I think that part of that is that being a parent, you start to learn things you never knew than when you weren't a parent. Equally, for me as a parent, when I reflect back on Hannah and her two brothers who also swam, I made all the same mistakes that I think all parents do. Become connected and ambitious, if you like, for them in a way that you're holding back emotionally. You go, no, that's not. But you actually sometimes behaviourally might actually not be fully truthful with your own understanding. All I do know is that for me, probably Hannah's brothers were more in line with it, because I made most mistakes with Hannah, was that if we are honest with ourselves and we do put pressure on our kids, we're not doing them a favour. And if at the moment there's pressure because they're not in the pool, and we're further putting pressure on by even suggesting that there's anything negative, I think it's wrong, because it's just not true. But you do have to be careful what you wish for. So my advice would be, enjoy this time, have a think about what things you enjoy about taking them to the pool, which is that connection, and even being poolside, watching them work, and be ready to support them when they get back in, because if initially they feel frustrated, just keep reminding them that they're doing it right. They'll get there without question. I'm not sure if I answered the question, but that was how I felt.
Awesome.
Definitely.
Awesome.
We have a question from one of our senior swimmers, Beth Dennis.
My question is to both of you. What is your experience of swimmer burnout?
Very good question.
Swimmer burnout.
Yeah. There's obviously the scientific terminology of swimmer burnout, where I think if a swimmer gets pushed to the point where their body physically breaks down and they're not or performance starts dropping more the more they try and do. There is obviously the physiological side, but there's also the mental side. And I think possibly the burnout might be more mental than it is physical, because our bodies are definitely a lot tougher and can go through a lot more than I think we really appreciate. But it can only take that as long as we get our recovery right. So that's sleep, good nutrition, good hydration, and getting good quality rest when it's required. Personally, I don't really think I've ever gotten to the point where I've been burnt out. I've been tired, and sometimes been very, very tired. But I've had to really call upon powers of really good recovery to try and overcome that, and also communicating with my coach at the same time, because it's important for them to be aware if I've felt fatigued. So exam time is obviously more of a psychological stress as well, and that can be really impactful on training. But also certain phases in the season, like at the beginning part, when you're trying to kind of get that fitness back in, and things definitely hurt a little bit more. You got DOMs. But keeping in communication, I think, with your coach, with, you know, we have like a system. So during lockdown with our file, we put in how our head feels, so basically our sort of mental space, but also how our body feels. So Patrick always has a good track of basically how we've been going, and you know, it will fluctuate. You get some people that feel great. We have one lad who, whenever you ask how he's feeling in his head, he's always a 1. He always feels on top of the world. Even if he's tired, mentally he's just always there, but physically he always puts different numbers. So I guess if you're able to kind of look after your mindset as well, I think that should hopefully help your body cope with tough training. But yeah, it's a really good question, and it's kind of one I've heard of. I've never, I guess, fully probably experienced it yet. I don't, yeah. Apologies, I've not been able to explain it properly.
Thank you.
I totally agree with what Hannah says, and certainly from the swimmer's perspective. From my perspective, there's a word decompression that is used a lot in coaching these days, and by that we mean taking the pressure off. And I genuinely didn't know until maybe 3 years ago what a lot of times were to get on certain squads. I'm a big fan of, and I might be a voice in the wilderness for other coaches, but I don't believe in chasing times and having that pressure of times. If we operate, as we develop age group swimmers, purely about targeting being at the British Summer Meet or being at this meet or having a PB, whatever a PB is, then for me that's just pressure. So somehow or other, quite early in the season, decompress that so that you'll find the burnout simply won't be there at the end of the season. So for example, I was talking to an athlete recently who was struggling with things, and Hannah happened to be in the conversation before. That swimmer was so keen to question something of me. They started talking, and I sort of sat back and listened. And as they paused, before I answered, as I'm doing to Hannah, she turned to him and she said, just get one thing right. Because he'd said, I'm struggling with what to do because I'm not doing this, I'm not. And she said, just get one thing right. And I then looked, and then she just explained it. She said, if you try and get 3 things right, you'll get 3 things wrong. Just try one. So with regard to targeting the end of season performance, if you go in and do the things right every session, you don't even need to think about it, because it will happen. So my view of burnout is sometimes too much awareness, not enough fun, not enough enjoyment of what you're doing. And that's not down to everybody around to entertain you. It's for you to try and work out ways of making it fun. You're an influencer just as much as your coach, because you're in the water. And by that, I don't mean have fun and distract the session, but celebrate when things are good, congratulate somebody doing really well, chase them down and congratulate yourself and wait to be congratulated. All of those things are what we love about swimming, or what we should love. That's my view. That's my view. I'm not sure if that makes any sense. What are your thoughts about it, Beth?
I don't know, I just think it's like quite a common thing like in a lot of clubs, like it always happens, and you just see so many people go, like leave because of it. Yeah. And it affects a lot of people.
Do you think sometimes it's in line with, there's an inevitable plateau? By that I mean people get better and better as you grow. If you grow 1 inch, you'll get 2 inches distance per stroke on your stroke. You can work out, if you get somebody who's 6 inches short of their full growth, have a look at what time they're doing at 75 meters, because that's what time they'll be doing at 100 meters when they're fully grown. So age group coaching is always about progression and progression, and everyone expects to get better. But then you reach a point where you plateau and things don't change for a while. And I think that's hard to accept. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I know, Hannah, I can't remember your plateau. I can remember 2 or 3 years where there was no PBs, there was nothing. And if you had fallen into that trap, you would not have even gone to the Olympic Games. You would have done nothing. I'm pretty sure of it. I'm not sure. Can you remember that?
Yeah, there's 2 plateaus, I think, from the age of maybe 17 to 19, but it kind of got a little bit masked with having the suits. But then again, from 19 to even 24, I also had another plateau. So yeah, it kind of peaks and then plateaus and then peaks and then plateaus. So like, my personal best for the 400 IM was back in 2009. So for me, it's not about chasing times, it's about trying to chase the process goal. Because I think, you can burn yourself out too much by just constantly chasing that time all the time. And it's the little components put together that kind of give you that outcome, because you can't control the outcome. You just got to give the best performance you possibly can amongst 7 other competitors. But yeah.
Well, this is probably, I'm sorry if it's prolonging the question, Beth, because I think it's such a good one. Over the years, you're only making me realize this. I've, like Hannah being the longest serving swimmer I've coached, if you like, but there are others too that have swum a long time. Rock climbing, she loves rock climbing. We introduced her to rock climbing many, many years ago. I know that she's tried a lot of paddleboarding and surfing, and I know that she'll do lots and lots of different things. When she was younger, she used to dance as well as swim. I always think female swimmers who dance tend to have a lot to offer. They have a lot more stability and structure in their core. They seem to balance in the water so much better. So I think having something other than swimming that you genuinely are interested in, whatever that is really, really important. And also being organized. I know that as a swimmer, you have to make sacrifices. You probably aren't going to the same social parties or events as others because you're taking your sport seriously. So how do you balance that out when other people seem to be having such a lot of fun and yours just seems to be this sort of grey world of work? You need to find some way of enjoying what you do, whatever that looks like. And I'm a bit older than Hannah. I can still go to a party now if I want to. We have a whole life of everything. I'm not saying don't go at all, but what I'm saying is don't stress over that. I think burnout sometimes isn't to do with the sport, it's to do with the whole mix of things that we have in life these days.
It's a great observation. The social balance is huge, post 14 particularly. We get a lot of swimmers who recognize what's going on around them in the world, and it's having the patience to realize you've got plenty of time for that as well.
If I'm honest, I think those 2 answers that you've just given are the best answers we've received to any question we've asked. And we've had some really good answers. So that was fantastic. Thank you very much, Beth. That was a great question as well.
Beth, I'll see you poolside.
Patrick, what attributes did Hannah have as a kind of 12, 13-year-old that may have helped her reach the milestones that she has?
If you'd have said 10, I'd have said none, because I remember standing on the blocks as a 10-year-old once and putting her goggles on, and they just snapped, they just broke, and she just burst into tears. And about 12 goggles got thrown from the balcony. But by 12, what I recognised in Hannah was, I think, a mental resilience more than anything else. Just you had to be very careful to say to Hannah what to do, because she would just take it to the nth degree. There are a few examples I won't go into here, but and also I think she was never afraid to be different, not seeking to be different, but if the crowd were going in that direction, I don't think she always felt the pressure to have to, which I don't quite get. I've got 3 children, they're all different on that one. But she seemed quite comfortable with deciding to do what she needed to do at quite an early age. We spent a lot of time working on flotation as a young athlete. She was my first child, so I had so much more advantage of being a parent coach is a lot of the access that you have. By that, you know what they've eaten, you know how they've slept, you know so much more. But also, having taught her to swim, I deliberately made Hannah an athlete who was as flat as possible, because I think it's my helicopter flying background. Cutting down resistance is key. So she used to swim literally with her face looking straight down, to the extent that she would actually only know somebody was in front of her when she touched their feet. And that's quite a psychologically difficult thing for anyone to do. You have to have total faith in what you're doing to operate that way. So I think it was her mental resilience, the desperate seek, and it continues to try and understand her physical movements. She still really revels in like Pilates and TRX instructions and things like that she does. She's a huge fascination. Probably the strongest coaching contact she's had, apart from myself, is her physiotherapist, who stopped working for her last year. There's so much, and it was the keenness of understanding the body. I'm not sure if that explains anything, because she was tiny, and she's still not a huge athlete, but she always punched above her weight, if you like, and it was down to efficiency and a desire to get better.
I did a little bit of research a couple of weeks ago on world-class profiling of height and weight, and Hannah's way below the average height of those 200, 400 IM girls, you know.
Yeah.
Hannah, in short, do you believe those qualities that you have, those values, are you were born with and were innate, or as part of your environment, something you learned through your environment?
Possibly a little bit of both. I guess Patrick mentioned I'm very literal, and I'm also quite gullible, so I do take things to the T, so I guess probably makes me quite easy to coach, but I don't really know where I'd learned that. I think that's possibly just who I am as a person. But I do think the environment as well helped, just with the support I had from both my mum and my dad, and then also having my brothers as well, as much as I love them. But I think they brought out a little bit more of my competitiveness, because even at school I felt like I had to prove myself against the sort of boys, thinking they were tough, and I'll be like, no, I can just be as tough. And I kind of reveled in being different. So I don't know if that was just something environmental with being in sport from a young age, or whether that was just something that was born in me. I genuinely don't know. I do think it's a little bit of both. It's kind of that nature nurture, and I think I have equal parts to play in it. But yeah, I kind of always strive to be a little bit different, and I don't know if that's just pure stubbornness or just the fact that I do enjoy just being that little bit different, not to stand out so much from the crowd, but kind of not being afraid of, like, I remember questioning some of the girls when they always used to get out early to go and dry their hair and do their makeup, like miss this 20 minutes of the session. I used to love staying in right until the very end, because I felt, well, I'm doing more meters than you, and I'd quite happily go to school with wet hair. And yeah, and I was lucky enough that I found a couple of friends who were also kind of within a similar bracket, but their focus was on music and drama, and they had a lot of like focus and intent on it. So I kind of surrounded myself, I guess, with people who had sort of similar values, and enjoying what they do, but getting the most out of it. But yeah, it's a good question. I don't 100% know what specifically has been innate born and which bit was environmental. It kind of, they do interlink quite a fair bit, I think.
Patrick, I was just going to ask if you could highlight whether anything was innate or taught.
Well, when Hannah was Hannah, correct me if it's wrong, I think you're probably 15 or 16. Where we live here, and I'm pointing as if you can see where I live, but we live about 3 miles from the pool, and it's a country road up until about 2 miles of it, and then the last mile is into the town, into the pool. It's a tiny community, really. So in the winter here, especially in the northeast of Scotland, it's pretty dark for most of the day. For 20 hours of the day, it can be dark. And Hannah would run to training in the mornings with like a light on her head, a hat, a small rucksack with just costume in, because she knew that I'd turn up with a towel and other bits. And she would leave. Now, I don't know if any parents are listening, but my philosophy is you don't wake your children up. I always told the parents to don't let the child have their own alarm clock, and they come and wake you up. If they don't get up, don't bring them in. I don't want them in if they're not choosing to be here. I don't want you to tell them, which is quite a hard one to get as a sort of philosophy in the club, but it can be done. And one particular morning, Hannah went as she normally did, and her brothers wouldn't because they're not the same athletes. And they would be in the car with me, and we'd always pass her about 800 meters before the pool. We'd pass by. The boys would love waving, and then we'd see her on the pool deck. But this particular day, we went and we never saw her at all. Got to the pool, no sign of her. We thought she'd gone a different way. And got to the pool side. At the far end, she was there, and she just had the brightest red face you've ever seen. And her eyes were huge. And went up, and she explained that about halfway you go past a farm, and she'd been chased by 2 dogs for the best part of a mile, I suppose. And I just thought, great, that's even better training. That's really good. So she'd got in really fast. She'd obviously been terrified, chased by 2 dogs. And we talked about it, did the training session, kind of forgot. Now, the next morning I got up, and I honestly would have thought any other human being on the planet would have waited for me to drive her, but no, she still ran the next day to training. So that's just my wee story about mindset and commitment and attitude to doing something without being put off. I wouldn't have run. I wouldn't. Sorry, Hannah, telling all your secrets here.
Just shows that ability to just look outside the box and, you know, explore it different ways, you know. Unbelievable. Final one from us on this one. If you, we ask this for everybody. I love this one. If you had 3 non-negotiables in training, what are those 3 non-negotiables for you guys?
I know that. Respect, reliability, and commitment. That's it. Because they cover everything. Sorry, Hannah.
No, it's okay. I'm just kind of trying to think of some of this because I know I can be a bit of a like a demon headmistress sometimes in training. You know, if people don't do things, I'm kind of like the worst person to be in a lane with. I do think respect is a huge thing. Taking responsibility. I hate it when athletes blame coaches for bad performances. I think we are the ones who are swimming. The coaches are there to guide us and to support us. So we need to take ownership of what we do. So respect and responsibility, and honesty as well. Being honest with yourself. You know, if you're going to miss out 100 meters in that swim down, or you're going to miss out, you know, part of the main training set because you need the toilet and you don't perform well, can you honestly say that you've done everything possible to get that performance right? So being honest and true with yourself, I think is important too.
It's funny. I like that question. Today we had a group chat earlier today with my squad, and we were talking about next season's values and standards. So we were listing the values and standards we want to operate at, and it's always a good exercise. It's particularly good when you have newer ones coming in, and most of mine are university athletes, but I do have 4 school age swimmers in there as well. So
next question, we've got Salah Tejas.
Hello.
Hiya, Salah.
Hi.
My question for both of you is, what was Hannah's biggest bad habit?
What do you think? What a great question.
Hey, several. I'm not sure. I kind of saw them as habits. I guess it's other people's perspective as to whether they were bad or not. The worst one I used to do was I used to rub my nose quite a fair bit, and I always gave myself a nosebleed. And still to this day I do that. I don't know why I do it.
I think sometimes Hannah would get, I've noticed it more as time's gone on, if she didn't get training in, if there was a reason. We had an old pool, and sometimes it would break. We came in once, there was no water in the pool. And sometimes it would be closed for a few days or even possibly a few weeks. We'd have to find ways around it. And I would notice she'd get quite anxious about just not swimming. And even if I write a session and it's on a Sunday, we used to do sometimes a session which is 10,000 meters long. And if you go to 9,900, Hannah won't get out unless she's done 10,000. She has to finish on a total. If you plan to do a 7K session, she will do the whole lot. So I think that's not necessarily a bad habit, but she gets distracted with that.
Yeah.
Bad habits? sometimes doesn't realize that the boys actually physically are stronger and they're going to go faster. So she keeps fighting with the boys. She tells people in other lanes if they're not doing something right. I'm not sure that's a bad habit either, but she does.
I think that's a good habit. That.
It can be a bit bloodhook sometimes, which isn't necessarily good.
As long as you're not on the receiving end of it, it's okay.
Yeah.
I think sometimes over-focusing on too much detail.
Yeah.
Hannah will know. I don't think Hannah's weight will deviate more than 0.5 kilogram in 12 months. And not because she's just fortunate, but because she'll actually renegotiate her eating habits according to 6 weeks out from a competition. She'll change her nutrition to reduce her skin folds, her fat element. And I think that's given her a lot over the years. But when you over-focus on those things, you need to be able to, like I said before, about decompress a wee bit. And also, as Hannah's got older, she's probably got different bad habits now than when she was your age.
Salah, thank you very much. I'm going to move on to Jess Shaw.
Hello. My question is, how do you control your nerves before races, meets and competitions?
Good question. I've kind of had to figure it out as I went along. So the two that I normally do, it may or may not work for you, but don't be afraid to try different things. It's okay to be nervous before a race. We're human, and sometimes having a little bit of nerves is quite good. It builds up a little bit of adrenaline and a bit of excitement as well. What's not okay is if you let those nerves kind of overspill a little bit and you freeze or you get sick, or it just basically really impacts on your performance. So for me, I kind of spot those signs with my increase in heart rate, increased breathing rate. I get really clammy hands. So if I get to that point in a call room, I will sit and do a couple of breathing techniques. So this may sound a little bit odd, but this is what works for me. I will close my eyes and I'll picture colors. So reds, oranges, and yellows, for me, they're quite hot, high stress colors for me. And then as I breathe in through my nose, I try and breathe in these cooling, calm colors. So blues, purples, greens. So I'm breathing in the cool color and breathing out the sort of hot, high stress colors. And by doing that, my heart rate naturally starts coming down a little bit more. You kind of feel a little bit more in control of your nerves, and my stomach settles down as well. And then I also use music. I use music to kind of try and distract myself, in a sense that if I can get a really good tune that gets my foot tapping or makes me want to get up and down, just helps build up the sort of right level of adrenaline that makes me feel like I'm ready to go. So not hyped up or pumped. I think sometimes that's possibly a little bit too much, but I kind of bring it up to a level where I feel in control. Heart rate's not super low because you don't want to be too chilled out before a race. But you've just got that right balance of a little bit of nerves, but it's manageable, so you know you can kind of go up in a race. And then especially if I'm doing a breaststroke event as well, I try and say 2 words to myself, so like long and strong or smooth and forward. And again, just those words just allows my brain to sort of focus in, because it's another thing with nerves. It's possibly more in girls than maybe in boys, but goes into overdrive. You kind of think of all the worst case scenarios, and what if this doesn't happen, what if that doesn't happen, and you can really tie yourselves in knots. So it's about controlling the heart rate, getting your mindset to kind of zone in on what you're meant to do and not let it get too distracted. So breathing, music, and saying 1 or 2 words to yourself. That combination of the 3 helps combat nerves and makes me feel more race ready.
Thank you very much. Really helpful.
No worries.
Yeah, I made some notes. Once Hannah was saying that, a couple of weeks ago, I was asked to talk about her event, the 400 medley, and I had a look, and all the years that Hannah's been swimming, she averages racing the 400 medley, and the 400 medley only. She does all the other events as well, but she races the 400 medley 17.8 times per year. So if you do that for 15 years, that's a lot of times. And also it's similar numbers for a lot of other events, the 200 medley, 400 free, sometimes the 200 fly, or even in the 200 breaststroke. So the more you race, the more you practice being in theatre. You know, like, I don't know if you do drama, but if you go on a stage, it's quite a shock if you ever go on the first time, because, you know, you practice lines and suddenly you've got an audience and lines. But when you swim, it's the same thing. You're practicing the theatre. So you practice that theatre in your local gala, whether it starts in your club championships and then your local district championships, and then some of you be lucky to go to maybe even national events. All it is getting up the stages. So don't underestimate that you're already practicing the right things. And the last thing I'll leave you with is, do you ever watch Britain's Got Talent?
Yeah.
You know when someone comes on who's rubbish, they're really bad. Nobody's told them. But also you get some people who come on and they seem really slick and polished. Then maybe they've practiced in their mind, or they've done the things Hannah's spoken about. They've got themselves relaxed and prepared, and it can be prepared for. Just before the Olympics in 2008, and Hannah was 17, I think, at the time, Olympic trials, 17 or 18, I can't remember.
18.
I was walking around the poolside, and she was on a bench with her feet straight out, leaning back with a hoodie on like this. And all I could see was her earphones down here. And I was the nervous one, not her. And I'm the coach. And often that's the case. The coach can be nervous and the swimmer's actually fine. So make sure you surround yourself with people that aren't nervous. And sometimes that might be your coach. Probably your parents. Your parents are doing everything right, but sometimes they're not the right people to have around. And I was a parent, so maybe that was my excuse. But I remember, so she's in that position. I walked around and I looked, and there was like 15 minutes before the call room was closing. And I was like getting there 10 minutes before. And I kept looking at the clock. And in the end, I tapped her foot with my foot, and her head came up. And she gave me such a filthy look, so aggressive. She really scared me. She literally went, and then her head went back down again, and that was it. So that was my briefing for Hannah to qualify for her first Olympics. Get out of my hair, I'm ready. And when there will be a time where you'll feel like that and you'll recognize it. And it's not easy to get into. It's not, I talk to Hannah about that a lot, but it doesn't happen that often, even with experience. But getting into that state, I think you can work it out. And I love the color thing. I think that's really good. Sorry, I've gone on a bit. That was a great question.
That was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. That was a great question. Patrick, how do you cope with the dual role of being a father and a coach? Obviously, you've mentioned it a few times, and we, as coaches, we're constantly talking and educating parents about how they're split roles, and we have our roles, they have their roles. How do you cope with both?
I mean, literally, it's only the last 3 or 4 seasons that I've done it professionally, to be truthful. In the past, I've chosen to do it, and I've done it voluntarily. The club I was in, I wanted other coaches and teachers to be paid so the club would survive, so didn't want to be paid. That sounds, maybe I am stupid, but you get a lot of leverage when people around you realize that you're committed to it and you're not looking for money, you're just looking for something to progress. And my belief was to get the club right. I did make a lot of parental mistakes. I think we can't help ourselves sometimes. I think the fact that I wasn't just swim coaching when it was as pressurized as it was in Hannah's development towards Olympics was a good thing. I would suddenly find myself flying a helicopter, and you can't really be thinking about swimming at that time. And in the same way, when I was coaching, I certainly wasn't thinking about flying helicopters. So I think I was fortunate rather than organized or planned or process driven on that helped. At the time, I thought it was just me doing too much and having an awful lot. But the more I see it, the more I realize that you can get out of your environment just to do something different before you get back in. It's a healthy option. Also, Hannah mentioned it briefly, her mum, my wife, doesn't know or show any interest in swimming in the same way. It would be so unhealthy if both parents are as nuts as I have been. And I probably overdo it because I tend to live so much in my head with a lot of it. It's just been a fascination for so long. So having that balance is helpful. It was always difficult with the boys coming through. I was always amazed at how respectful they were of Hannah. You know, Alistair was very young when he went out to Beijing with his mom, and I was on the team, and Hannah was on the team, and he went out with his mom to watch. So they're very proud of what she's done and very supportive of that. I've never seen them, be envious in any way or show any indication of that. And I think mainly because they realize the only reason she's where she is because of the way she operates. And I think they realize that they weren't prepared to operate at the same level, and probably both had the same opportunity but made different choices. So for me, that period of time was never planned. I do read a lot about lots of different things, and there's a lot of performance athletes at the highest level that are connected or coached by their parents, and I really do get that. I think there's a huge connection that you have so much more information, like I said before, about nutrition, sleep, some aspects, but also perhaps damaging, because you can be quite pushy, and I've been pushy. I've been it's very easy to point and be harsh at someone in the pool that you're going to get away with because their parents not going to come back at you, and that's Hannah. So that sounds a bit draconian, but she probably did receive that. I know Hannah will know this. I probably would have pointed out some behaviors that were collectively happening that probably weren't her, but if she's seen to be part of that, everyone then takes note. That's quite a difficult one. The hardest thing was recognizing that some people thought that you were only there because of your one child, and you knew full well that that wasn't it. I was driven and involved in swimming long before Hannah was in the pool. But clubs are generational. Families will come in, be involved, and do great things, and then a new wave will come through. And it's maintaining that culture that transitions to the next one that holds the same values. I did once sit around in a circle with all the parents, and I don't know if parents are listening here, but and I started the talk. I was a lot younger and a lot more naive than I am now, and I started to talk by walking, literally put the chairs in a circle. I said, can I just have a show of hands before we start this meeting of any parent here, because the parents sat down with children on the outside. Any parent here who's been to a competition, watched their child get beaten, and then felt either angry or jealous or upset that some other child has beaten your child. Put your hand up if you've ever felt that way. And then I walked around, and then when nobody put their hands up, I said, right, now that I know you're all prepared to lie, let's have a proper conversation. We're all human, we're all emotional, but we need to kind of say it and then get over it. Yeah, I felt really bad, but I feel a bit of a twit now because really it's so silly. Let's talk about supporting other people's children and supporting the club first, and allow your child to develop within the club. A risk strategy, I can't recommend it, but
Nicholas, if you can turn your camera on, I know you've got a question.
Nicholas?
My question's for you, Patrick. When you coached Hannah when she was younger, could you predict the success she would have?
No. That is a really good question. My immediate answer, Nicholas, is no, because you can't know what's in the future. But I did believe that if anybody was going to try and, when Hannah first started to swim well, the British record was about 4 minutes 45. It was just slightly ahead of Sharon Davis, who got an Olympic silver medal in like 1984 in 4 minutes 46. So we were chasing a time of 4 minutes 45. And now her best time of British record is 4 minutes 31. That's a big, big difference. So I always believed that she was going to bring that time down. So it depends on where you talk about success. If you talk about getting onto the podium, and Hannah's been on a podium in every international event except the Olympics, and that's a hard one. That's the hardest one to get for lots and lots of reasons. So my instinct is, no, I wouldn't have predicted, particularly when she was 10, 11 or 12, because she was just a young kid, just living her life. But the older she got, the more my confidence grew in the fact that she was going to be as successful as she chose to be. Does that make sense?
Hannah, what did you know the success you were going to have?
Not really. I mean, if you saw the state of my breaststroke up until I was about 19, I could swim it faster backwards and forwards. No, I think, I mean, I remember watching the Olympic Games. Another thing with Patrick is that he loves to analyze all the swims and the races. And whenever World Championships were on, Olympic Games, the European Championships, each day was always recorded on a VHS tape. And I think I remember sitting in, or was that 2004? I just remember being in a cardboard box watching an Olympic Games going on, and just being completely in awe of the concept of the Olympics and the lights, the sort of intenseness of the competition and the racing. And I kind of thought, oh, that'd be really cool to go to the Olympics, but it was probably more of a dream than a goal, something that you could sit and think about and it make you feel quite happy, but probably something that as a 10-year-old you never really thought, that's what I am definitely going to do. I know that's going to happen. And even when we went on camps, we had logbooks and we had to write down goals, short-term goal, mid-term goal, and long-term goal. And for the long-term one, everybody was putting down they want to make the Olympic Games. And I kind of thought, well, if they're writing that down, I'll write that down too. But then I felt, well, everyone's writing down, going to the Olympic Games and winning a medal. So I thought, right, I want to go to the Olympic Games, bracket, preferably being on a podium with a gold medal around my neck. So I felt, again, trying to be a little bit different, I had to be more specific with it. But by setting the short-term goal and the mid-term goal, and then when I started achieving those, it then made me realize that actually these little steps are helping me get towards that. And I just loved racing. I just love being in that competition environment, stepping up, trying to achieve those little goals, whether it's progressions in PBs when you're younger, or if it's achieving something like finally fixing my breaststroke. Little things like that just kind of over time added up, and then it kind of gave you a bit more of a realization. And I think it wasn't until I made the team for the European Juniors that my dad sat me down and showed me the Olympic Games book, the one where you collected stickers from, is it the Esso Garage? And he'd written in, I can't remember which Olympic Games it was it 1972?
It was the 72 Olympics. I was 11 or 12, and I wrote down all the results. Mm-hmm. And at the time, the times that were in there, you were 14 when I showed you that. At the time, that Olympic Games, your best times would have got you 10 Olympic gold medals. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to you about Mark Spitz, who got 7 Olympic gold medals, and how good he was, and how much swimming had moved on. Yeah, I didn't realize you'd remember that. Yeah. I've still got that. I've got it here.
And I think it was just little things like that where it just gives you that little confidence booster that it is going like in a right direction. And he also mentioned that those who made an Olympic team had also been to a European Championships, and even more so, like I was watching Jana Klitschkova and Beatrix Kasleru, make their sort of mark in the medley world. And they both been to European Juniors, they both won medals, and then I ended up winning a silver medal at the European Junior Championships in 2005. And that really kind of gave me a little bit of a, okay, this is kind of cool actually. I thought this will be, I feel like I'm actually starting to get there. And then 2006, I qualified for first Commonwealth Games as part of Team Scotland. And the whole part of being in a village, the whole atmosphere, just in a multi-sport event, I kind of realized, you know what, I can study until I'm 99, but I can't necessarily swim at an elite level until I'm 99. I'm going to make the most of this. Wherever it takes me, I'm going to take this opportunity. So I guess I kind of always had like that dream of I'd like to be successful, but never really, I think, truly believed it until it was literally just there in my face. So taking each day as it came, working hard, because I want to be different. Nobody liked to work hard. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to enjoy it. And I always got that buzz at the end of the sessions, the ones that were particularly tough.
That's great. Yeah. We have one more question from Ruby Duncan.
Yep. Patrick, why did you choose to be Hannah's coach and not somebody else?
These questions are great. Obviously, when she was little, I taught Hannah to swim, and she learned to swim when she was 3, and it took 20 minutes. The reason was because when I would come home from work when she was little, even when she was in a little plastic ring that used to stick to the bath, I always wanted to do bath time, because her mum would leave and say, I'll do the bath, and I would put swimming goggles on her and just pour water all over her head all the time, so that she started to learn breathing really early. So I hope there's no social workers listening. Yeah. My wife's a social worker, so she's given me permission. I was always very interested, and then we would float in the bath, fill the bath up a little bit deeper than normal, and then just get her to float. So teaching her to swim was really, really, really easy. And I swam myself, so when she was growing up and her brothers were growing up, going to the pool as a parent is a really enjoyable thing, because you could play games then. You can play sharks, where I would give myself a shorter distance swim or longer distance swim, and then get Hannah to try and catch me up. Well, it didn't take long before it was the other way around. And so I was coaching a club, so it was the only club at the time that we could get her to. And of course, I couldn't drive her to a different club to then coach myself, so she just joined the club. There was a time when she was about 16, 17, and she got to European juniors within the club, and she looked at going to America and took the exams to go to an American university, and American universities wanted her to go there. And I have often thought, I wonder how different all of our lives would be if she'd have done that. But Hannah passed the exams and could have gone, but actually sat me down and said, I don't want to do that. I want to do it where we are. And not only that, wanted to do it and stayed in the program. So it was a 4-lane, 25-meter pool. And she got to 3 Olympic Games out of it. And I think that's really important to hear, because it's not to do with her being my daughter, or you can get to as high a level as anybody if you want to, if you choose to, and if the work's right. It isn't always about the facility or the support or necessarily going somewhere else that's better. However, if it is the right thing to do, it is the right thing to do as well. So, for example, I have other swimmers that have moved and gone elsewhere because it was right for them. In a sense, Hannah took more of a risk because I was still working. I wasn't. People won't know this, but a lot of the coaching that Hannah's had has been herself. It's been a script. So, as a coach, my main job was mentoring and leading other coaches poolside. I never ever asked for a coach to have a qualification. I asked them to be legally allowed to be on poolside and passionate about, and a quick learner. And I would coach and educate them. I would be at the whiteboard just constantly, like we are here, talking at them, getting them to understand it, starting with just using a stopwatch and then understanding pace, understanding the strokes. So if you go elsewhere and you get lots and lots of scientific support, that could be great. But if you're doing all the basics right, it's amazing how far you can get. Having been to the Olympics and World Championships, I was on a bus once with the Hungarian team. The first time I realized, because one of the coaches was quite a good friend, they don't have physiotherapists on their team at all. They don't use sports scientists. They don't take lactates. They don't do any of that. They just swim and they just coach. And in a sense, that's kind of what Hannah did, I guess, in the same way we did it a bit. People would say old-fashioned. I'm not sure that's the right phrase, but it's different. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Ruby.
It does. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Ruby.
I'd like to just add to that, Patrick. As a coach, I've been on deck for 18 years now, and in that time, I've seen a lot of stuff that you guys have put out. I've seen Hannah floating in all sorts of different positions and skills and drills that you put out there in presentations. And I can't state enough to our membership how diligent and intelligent the programming that you guys do. It's been awesome to see from an outside, and I can only imagine. We have swimmers now that are 18, 19, 20, 22 in university programs or in their own practice, learning that practice of transferring from coach-driven practice to athlete-driven. And I can only imagine between the two of you that must be an amazing experience to share that as well.
Yeah, you're right. I do think giving the swimmers independence early, and it was kind of forced. I'm not saying I knew this was going to be the best process, but I've realised now that it is. The more independent the athlete can be, the more they're going to survive anyway. Because if you get them to a level they go to, let's say European juniors as a starting point, and then maybe the first senior European short course, something like that, the chances of you being on the team are pretty small because they're not going to send many. So they've got to be able to deal with a high pressure situation before they've been in the high pressure situation. And I think a lot of that is independence and their own authority. Also, if I can't trust a swimmer to do the work, then I've trained them to understand what they need to do, then they're never going to do that mindful practice or that focused practice to get it right or to get it more right. So you can filter people very, very quickly. I think for me, I know the 100% attendance people for my Zoom sessions whilst we've been off. I know who they are. And I know those who are 90, 80, and I know those who are 50 or less. They're very, very few, but all they've done is clarified everything I already knew.
Yeah, I was going to say, we do have some quick fire questions.
Right, short and sweet one to begin with. Who's the best cook between you?
So Patrick says Hannah.
Patrick says
Hannah.
Hannah.
Who made the dinners when Hannah was a child? Was that Mum?
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Who's the best at keeping secrets? Hannah again.
Oh.
Patrick. Each other.
Dispute. Okay. Who's the best at waking up in the morning? I imagine you're both better than me.
Changed. Yeah.
Oh, Patrick.
Yeah.
If Hannah was a cartoon character, who would she be?
Yeah.
Water Girl.
Water Girl. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The only reason is that is a cartoon character that Hannah is. I don't know if you've seen
Yeah. One of my Sponge Watermans made a comic and then created like a little cartoon series. I was turned into a superhero.
Final one. What superhero would Patrick be?
Ooh.
We know what Hannah would.
I think Charles Xavier.
Oh.
I'll tell you why that's funny, because when we came up with these questions, that's exactly who Ben said. Patrick.
Really?
It is exactly what I get that.
Would you agree, Patrick?
I don't know who he is.
X-Men is the Mr. Intelligent and X-Men.
Oh, right.
That's pretty much everything from us and all of our questions. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank you for your time. We're scheduled at about an hour. We've gone an hour and a half. So your answers have been absolutely incredible. And I know everyone that's watched and everyone that will be watching on YouTube will really, really appreciate everything that you've done. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your time, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Ben. And thanks to the questions from the swimmers. They were great.
They were very good.
Thanks.
All the best.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Hannah.